engaging rural communities with GIS. We have Suzanne Paul, who was a former Parks employee, and we're excited to hear all the amazing things she's doing. So you could get going whenever you're ready, Susan.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Keegan, for inviting me, and it's so fun to see all your names out there. Yeah, I worked for the Park Planning and Stewardship Division for about 8 years, I guess, and started with Mary Bradford and um, uh, Brooke Farquhar and John Hench, like that whole kind of period of time. And during the pandemic, we moved to Maine, to Mount Desert Island. And I don't know how many people are familiar with this area or have been to this area, but the acronym for Mount Desert Island is MDI. So you'll hear me use that quite a bit. I found a job working as a consultant with a really small company here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But one of the major issues that we work on is housing. And it's been an interesting experience for me to come in as a planner with GIS skills and be able to apply that in this role in a part of the country and a part of the state where there really aren't a lot of resources for planning and GIS. So I was saying this in the beginning when people are still coming on, but I'm a planner. So the first part of this presentation is really to give some planning context to the map that I'll share towards the end. And please do let me know if you have questions. I can't see your boxes or whatever. So I don't know, Keegan, if you can, or if you want to interrupt with questions, is totally fine. This is really meant to be informal. So just to give a little background on Maine and housing, and then this MDI Housing Solutions Initiative and the map to set that up. I am currently living on the coast of Maine on this island. It's the largest island in Maine and one of the largest, I think, in the continental United States. And we are so far east, I really believe we should be in the Atlantic time zone. It gets really dark right now. But yeah, that's where I am located now. A little background on Maine and kind of looking at it versus Montgomery County. So Maine, the population is around 1.4 million, spread out over 35,000 square miles. And compared to Montgomery County, that's very, very different. Just a little less population there in a much smaller area. Maine is the oldest state in the United States, and the part of Maine where I'm living is even older than that median. And the median income is significantly lower than certainly the Washington, D.C. area. Maine is a home rule state, so there's about 480 municipalities that all provide their own services. The average town in Maine is about 1,000 people. Property taxes are the main source of funding for municipalities. So Maine is one of 3 states in the United States that has no local option taxes. So what that means is like any sales tax generated, I live in the town of Bar Harbor, which is one of the 4 towns on Mount Desert Island. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but that's this one right here. And Bar Harbor, MDI is home to Acadia National Park, and Bar Harbor is like a gateway town to Acadia, along with the other towns in the island. It generates a tremendous amount of revenue for the state of Maine, and that goes back to the state, and then it's essentially divvied out to run state programs. So it doesn't necessarily all come back to the towns that generate that revenue. And that has implications for, how much towns are able to budget and spend on a whole range of things, including sort of municipal services, government planning, GIS. I would say not every town has a code enforcement. They definitely do not all have planners. And not every town has a code enforcement officer, for example. So it's sort of like a rural doctor that makes visits to different towns, and they might have like office hours in one town on one day, every other week, just to give some perspective. So let's talk about housing. Maine's housing stock is pretty old, and a lot of it is in disrepair. So over a quarter of the homes in Maine were built before 1939. They can be really expensive to maintain and extremely expensive to heat. So we've already had snow twice here, and it's in the 30s today. There's very little multifamily housing, and what's built is really built in like the Portland metro area and some in a few of the other small cities. Skilled labor is really hard to find and it's very expensive. And most new houses that are being built in Maine, I would say in the last 15, 20 years are built as one-offs. And a lot of what you see along the coast are second homes, often like luxury homes. You're not seeing a lot of development through subdivisions. Maine Housing released a report in 2023 estimating that Maine needs over 80,000 new housing units by 2030. There's an extremely low vacancy rate here. And the median income, the incomes needed to afford the median home price in Maine, it's like very out of whack. So this is sort of like a quick snapshot of what the housing situation is. Another major factor in vacation land is the what we call short-term rentals, vacation rentals industry. So this is a huge industry here. One of the towns I work with, they're maybe like over 60% of the housing units in that town are vacant, and the majority are vacant because they're being used for short-term rentals, vacation rentals. So this is like a slightly extreme version in terms of the price, but the average, like, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, year-round family home here, not on the coast, can generate, $3,000, $4,000 a week as a short-term rental, a vacation rental, which means there's huge incentives to rent your house out that way, or to buy houses and use them as lodging. So this is like a massive component to the housing crisis here. And the state currently does not regulate it. And there's all this rumbling about regulation of vacation rentals, but the town I live in, Bar Harbor, is extremely assertive in municipal regulation. And so they do actually regulate, they've capped the number of short-term rentals. I think it's 20% of the housing stock currently, and they are not going to issue additional licenses until it falls below 10%. So I just mentioned that because this is like a large component to the housing situation here. So when I moved here on the last day of February, I think, in 2021, I had just left my job at Parks, and it was very dark and very cold, and everything was closed seasonally. The towns here shut down for about 6 months of the year. And it was like extra closed with COVID. It was really hard to meet people. Eventually, I found my way into this job where I'm working now as a consultant, and this is my business partner here. And so he was trained as a planner and started this company about 12 years ago. And we do all kinds of sort of municipal planning and technical assistance work all over the state, primarily in the MDI and Acadia region, but a lot in Mid-Coast Maine. So that's like Camden, Belfast is a client of ours that we work with, the city of Rockland, Maine. And then we do some work down east as well. So if you're familiar with some of the very small coastal towns as you go towards the Canadian border, and then we're working on a project in Western Maine as well. The state requires comprehensive plans for all these little towns, right, that have like very few resources to do any kind of planning work whatsoever. So we do get hired to work on comprehensive plans. The person I work with has a specialty in sort of coastal planning, harbor planning, and the state has recently made a lot of money available for resiliency work, especially around flooding. There was a series of really bad storms that came through 2 winters ago, creating a lot of damage along the coast of Maine, where a lot of municipal infrastructure is located. And we also have a whole kind of other side, which is permitting and development and owners rep work. So this is where I live, and this is obviously like a really beautiful picture from a drone image, but just to kind of capture the like feeling of this place, it's really extraordinarily beautiful. And this is looking at the town of Tremont. This is the village of Bass Harbor. This is Bernard, and this is kind of looking up towards Acadia National Park. But yeah, people want to come here for vacation. We see about like 4 million visitors a year coming to MDI and to visit Acadia National Park. And the island itself, so this is the kind of look at the region. This is the 4 towns in the island. These are called the outer islands, and there are year-round residents, very few on these outer islands as well. The 4 towns on the island have a population of about 10,000 year-round residents, 5,000 in Bar Harbor, and the rest spread out between these 3 towns. When we started this housing solutions initiative and this mapping effort, we were trying to look at it on what we were calling like the micro-regional scale, because the economies of these towns are all sort of interconnected, and they share a lot of the same housing challenges and transportation issues as well. Next, I'm going to kind of just breeze through some data that I think helps also set the stage for this housing crisis in this area. So this is home ownership data, but coming from Maine Housing. And so what you can see here is a percent change in median home prices and then in incomes since 2000. And right around the pandemic, there was this like huge divergence there that has really continued on. And this is the data behind, part of the data behind that graph coming from Maine Housing. So these are the towns in that little micro region. And just as an example, the median income in Southwest Harbor compared to the income needed for the median home price just shows you like the kind of extreme gap there. And then like if you look at the total homes sold column versus the affordable homes sold, or homes affordable to the median income, it's pretty staggering. And it's created a huge issue with trying to attract and retain employees. For businesses have huge seasonal employee populations that they also need to house. And then school enrollments have suffered dramatically as homes that could be year-round have really been turned into vacation rentals. This is looking at the MDI region. So, it's way more owner-occupied housing units than renter-occupied. This is kind of what I was getting at before. There's a lot of vacant homes. It's almost the reverse in this one town we're working at, where I think it's like 62% of the homes are vacant. And this chart breaks down like why they're vacant. So in this area, they're predominantly vacant because they're being used for seasonal purposes. So we were like, as a consulting firm in this area, we work with nonprofits, we work with institutions on the island and in the region. Everybody's talking about this issue. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? This is a problem. All the towns are sort of, in this position where they don't have the resources they need to necessarily be proactive as towns. And so my colleague and I were like, we need to have a big summit, a big conversation where we pull all these people together and have a collective sort of coalition building effort. So in 2023, we created this like MDI Housing Solutions Summit, and we invited probably, I think maybe like 75 people showed up from all the major institutions in the area and sort of like the industry representatives. So, it's a small area and everybody knows each other, but I'll just tell you a little bit about like this woman runs the YMCA, and this person is the vice president of a major bank. This is the library director. This is another bank person. This person's a landscape architect. There's realtors. There's like a land use attorney. There's Bear, my husband. who works as an administrator at the college. So the college president was there as well, National Park superintendent, the Coast Guard. You can imagine like all of the different sort of sectors represented. This woman started her own modular home business. And so the idea was to put people together for a day and really have a very facilitated conversation about what are the barriers that you're observing, what are the needs, what are the barriers, and then what are some of the solutions to overcome those barriers. And we very intentionally created groups so that people were together who don't normally talk to each other and could hear each other's perspectives, and then asked really uncomfortable questions. There's a lot of money that is being made in this area. And I think there's a lot of like very divisive energy and contentious feelings about sort of the tourism industry in general. And so we tried to have a very good volunteer professional facilitators come in and help. But like, how do we have like a frank conversation where we're really looking at this from all perspectives? So that was very successful. And even in 2023, you could tell there was this like pent up energy for people coming together that they hadn't really had enough opportunity to do that coming out of the pandemic. So after the success of that 2023 summit, we wrote this report and we created a framework for action. So like, how are we going to start approaching this issue? And came up with all these sort of like action items and tried to engage some of these participants to, take the baton and run with it as well. We did a series of conversations with the Historical Society at local libraries about the summits and the data and sort of what our next steps would be. Created a website for this project, and we had like a series of conversations with different groups like realtors and builders and policymakers at the state legislature who are trying to work on the local option tax issue. This is a meeting we convened with Angus King, and these are some of the leaders of the island institutions as well. So this guy's like the superintendent of the national park, Kevin Schneider. This is a Coast Guard representative, and so on and so forth. And one of the big, two big things that came out of it also was this idea that we really need better numbers to understand like how much housing do we need and what kind, and then where should it go? And this is where I'm going to like transition into the discussion of the map. And this slide is just showing, this is a report that we commissioned with a consulting firm in Boston called RKG, and they had done a housing needs analysis for the town of Bar Harbor. And we said, it really needs to be done on more of that like micro regional scale. And then we got to work creating this map. But I just wanted to pause to ask if there were any questions so far. And also, please keep me posted on the time.
I don't see any questions, Susan. It's about 11:25 right now.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so next I'm going to talk a little bit about, just really briefly about that study, and then go into the map. And let me see if I can, this is like the end of the slides. Okay, so after the success of that first summit, I was like, oh my God, there's so much incredible energy, positive energy around this. We need to sort of rebrand this. It's not just this one summit meeting. Let's call it the initiative and like make it sort of a larger thing, intentionally not trying to start a new nonprofit or anything like that. So we made this website, which kind of goes over a lot of the information that I just shared with you guys. And then this resources section is where this past year in 2025, we really worked on these like two big components. This is a study, so looking at, again, demographics, like the existing housing stock, looking at the needs, and then the biggest thing was coming up with these housing production targets. So how much how much additional housing do we need in this region? The state had produced these numbers at the state scale, so that was where it was like 80,000 or more new units. Then they broke it down to the county scale, but we really wanted to look at it on a town by town level. There's some thinking that the state was going to set um, like requirements that individual towns be producing certain numbers of units. That hasn't happened, and that's extremely difficult to imagine happening here. But then the other part of it is this map, and so I'll jump into that next. So what I'll show you first is a story map that I created to similarly provide some context and kind of package the story of this map, and then I'll show you the actual web map as well. And this is really, like, I describe this to people as like, this is an experiment. This is a work in progress. We are trying to see like if we can come up with things that make sense on the local level or the regional level for this area and the particular dynamics of this area. Knowing that there's the possibility that the state may pass legislation for the whole state, which is not a one size fits all approach always. So the story map is broken into these couple of different parts. There's an introduction, there's an explanation of the map, there's an explanation of the criteria that were used and the analysis, how it worked to create the map. And then there's some sort of implementation, like how do we recommend using this map, or what are some ways that your town or community could use this map. So I'll just scroll through to kind of show a little bit about how this is laid out, but this is a lot of what I was just talking about earlier, the PowerPoint slides. This is there's a nonprofit on the island called the Island Housing Trust. They do down payment assistance, and then they also develop neighborhoods, small neighborhoods of workforce housing. And this is a modular project that we helped project manage in Bar Harbor. So the kind of big questions that we're trying to answer with this map and the data report: how much housing and what kind do we need? Where should it go? And how will we make that happen? So in the report, the how much part, this, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this is a chart that this consulting firm that we subbed out to helped us create. So this takes the state numbers that were then boiled down to the county level, and then we looked at creating a range. So we weighted it in two ways, one based on households and one based on employment for each of the towns in this little region. And that gives us a sense of like, okay, how much are we shooting for? That's summarized here. And then really like the where should it go? So this map was created really with the intention to illustrate existing land use policies around, especially around residential land uses. So there are several different criteria that went into this. I'll just explain it, and then I'll kind of go into the actual web map to look at it a little more closely. But what I decided to do was look at, okay, where is the existing water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure? So I put a half-mile buffer on water and sewer infrastructure, and then like dissolved that and essentially created like a infrastructure layer. Then looked at clusters of parcels that are 20,000 square feet, because that's sort of the minimum lot size for on-site septic. And then looked at growth areas. So these are established in the comprehensive plans that are required by the state. And the growth areas are the town's way of saying, this is where we intend to grow or invest municipal dollars in infrastructure and development. And then we took all of the zoning and sort of reclassified it as like high, medium, low for residential zoning. So we used residential high and then residential medium, and then weighted them. And then love raster analyses. That was sort of part of like how I was educated in graduate school. I'm not suggesting by any means that I'm like an expert in it, but I think it's like a really interesting way to combine this information and just sort of see, again, it's an experiment, like see what you get. So what I think I explained that we weighted these as well. So we weighted the sewer, proximity to sewer the highest, and then proximity to water. Then the next level was the village patterns, the growth areas, and the high density residential. And then the medium density residential was weighted the lowest. And so it's really interesting to like share this with you all. I know some of you maybe are familiar with this area, but when we shared this with people here, the reactions were so interesting because some people were like, "Oh, that makes sense," and then other people were like very um, anxious or concerned. There's a real fear about overdevelopment in this area, which makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of the industry is based around scenic resources. And the idea that whether you're a one-time visitor and you're coming and seeing these sort of like quasi traditional small town village, fishing village areas, or you are somebody whose family has had a home in this area for generations and you want to come back and kind of experience it in a similar way. Um, I think there's a lot of concern about, is this map saying that we're going to, develop out to all these areas? And the answer is really no. The idea is that this is a way to say, here's what your current existing policies are telling us about where you have decided you think development makes the most sense. That was sort of the intention, I guess, behind creating this. And then thinking about like, well, what do you do with that? So I'll just scroll down into this next part. This is where it talks about the criteria. Like, what do you do with that? So how do you use this? And so we just came up with a couple of different examples, regulatory examples, public-private partnership examples, and then resource and data sharing examples. So like, could you create a TIF district around one of those darkest purple areas for housing? Or could you say pass policies in your town that expedite or streamline the permitting process? So, all these towns are run by essentially volunteer committees. The planning board that's volunteers. The select board people are elected, but none of these people are like professionals necessarily in those roles. And could you create like pre-approved building designs and make it a little bit easier? Public-private partnerships, I have this dream of like this region creating a housing trust fund that could be funded by a couple different sources. And then you could say, enable municipalities to either draw from that trust fund or make financial investments in the extension or upgrade of infrastructure. And then some of the resource and data sharing examples, like looking at where the town might own land. So if you zoom in on a certain area, it's like looking at and identifying where there might be vacant parcels or town-owned land. And I'll just switch over to so if you're in the story map, there's a link to the actual web map. And right now, it displays I'll zoom in. This is the town of Southwest Harbor. And this is the like color scale that we're using for kind of saying this is a higher priority area according to the policies. And turn on. So this is actually where my office is located. I'm gonna turn this off for a second, you guys can see. So this is like a historic, village. Southwest Harbor is a really active working harbor. The Coast Guard is located here. And then there's a ton of like private piers, and there's historically was a lot of shipbuilding in this area, but it's really moved off the island, unfortunately. But looking at like, for example, what if we took the um, purple areas or like some grouping of those highest, these all, when you do it in raster, um, these all have numbers assigned to them. So what if you took like, the top three or top four and like clipped out all of the parcels and said, okay, where are the vacant ones? Where are the municipally owned ones? Or where are the ones of enough acreage that you could potentially, they're undeveloped. You could do some kind of meaningful additional development, or like, is there some sort of incentive program that you offer the school, the elementary school is located right here. Is there like a program where you say, we're going to help incentivize year-round rentals in the darkest purple areas, something like that. Um, yeah, so those are just a couple of examples about um, like how we're thinking about this could be used. We're basically at a point right now where our next steps are the communities here don't have a lot of opportunity to be super proactive, right? They're overwhelmed by the their requirements to just like their general municipal operation. And we're trying to reach out to committees and say, can we meet with you? Like, how does this help you? Does it help you? What are some really simple ways that you could think about using this or start to create kind of a um, one project that might help you solve this issue in your area? And the last thing I'll say, like the intention is to expand this out. This is the town of Trenton and Lemoyne, and this is the city of Ellsworth, which is the county seat for Hancock County. Ellsworth has like a professional planning staff and GIS, but these towns do not. The intention is to like expand this out to do the whole analysis on that scale as well. Um, anyway, I don't really have like a perfect conclusion to this presentation or story, but that's really sort of what this project is in a nutshell. Um, yeah, I'm happy to answer questions or whatever you think time-wise is possible. And I can
Yeah,
stop sharing or um, leave it on if it's helpful.
I would say I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm sure people have questions. I have a couple of my own. First, I want to
Yeah.
say like really good work. And I think it's a very good use of a story map. I think story maps go a long way, and you could share maybe complex information in a really clean package manner. So, kudos to you there. I
Thank
do
you.
have a question about some of I think the higher priority areas,
Yeah.
and I don't know anything about Maine. I will say that.
Okay.
One, how like does the existing infrastructure need to be updated? Let's say, this is like a high priority area. Let's put some homes here. Does the existing infrastructure need to be updated? And is there like an environmental concern as well? And how, like, this being there's so many historic areas here, how does that work
Mhm.
with permitting? So kind of three questions.
Yeah, well, I can say there's definitely an environmental concern to additional development occurring without public water and sewer. So this town right here is called Tremont, and they have no public water and sewer, but like this is an area where the Airbnb industry has really exploded. And so what you have is a lot of homes that are permitted for like 3 bedroom, 2 bath, for example. But when they're rented out, you have like 8 or 12 people staying. Their septic is permitted for 2 bathrooms, right? And with
Mhm.
a certain amount of use. And so what these residents are extremely concerned about is groundwater contamination. You have a lot of failing septics
Mhm.
as a result, or like they're failing more um, frequently. So that is a big environmental concern for sure. Yes, there are needs to upgrade and improve some of the existing water and sewer, municipal water and sewer infrastructure. This community here, so this is a village within the town of Mount Desert. This is called Soamesville. and so they have sewer, but then they're all on wells. And this is another really small village called Town Hill, but it's in a totally different town. This is the town boundary of Bar Harbor. And so there's been this talk about, could we just extend the sewer from Soamesville to Town Hill and then invest in Town Hill as a village, where it makes sense to potentially put more housing, but that's two towns having to come together and, you know, logistically, financially figure out how to make that work, which is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure if I totally got your question about the historic part, but like there's extreme fear, I don't know if fear is the right word, but like discomfort with change,
Yeah.
right? And so growth, like if you think about solving this issue in a couple of different ways, one is to build new, and then one is to convert existing units that are being used for short-term rentals, like back into year-round housing, for example. There's a lot of discomfort with change in aesthetics, and then also change in sort of like what it feels like to be a small, quiet coastal village. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's certainly a big part of it.
Okay. I see Brenda has a question. She asks, is there strong opposition to multifamily housing? And what
Yes.
about the missing middle portions of this map?
Yeah, right. Oh, right. So in general, like you really don't have a lot of multifamily housing is not really being built. I mean, there's exceptions here and there. People, I was able to facilitate a board meeting for the Island Housing Trust, and their board was like, I feel like someone joked that like duplex is the dirty word, and I was like, I live in a duplex, and we have a piano, like on our shared wall. Um, but I'm somebody who came from living in literally in like downtown Washington D.C. and like has lived in apartment buildings, and I think there's a demographic here, not across the board, but there are a lot of people who either come here or live here because they want quiet and they don't want a lot of density. And so that's a real challenge. And so yeah, multifamily housing is tricky. There's an organization here this is a village called Northeast Harbor within the town of Mount Desert, and they're currently trying to build 6 workforce housing units on a piece of land that is zoned for and appropriate for that. It's like right near the library and the school. And it's like, I think 2 duplexes of the 6 and the rest are detached. And the neighboring community basically sued the town
Wow.
and has taken it to the Superior Court, and it's been written about in the sort of like New England news to stop this from happening. And so and that's a summer community. Those are people that are there for, maybe a month of the year. Um, and yeah, so there's a real challenge there with the aesthetics of um, additional housing, multifamily or not, and then just the ability to make it happen at scale given the infrastructure.
I
But in terms
think
of missing middle, I mean, like that's what really needs to get built. If you think of
yeah.
missing middle housing as either income or housing types, like, both are missing here.
I we're right at time. I do want to maybe take one more question where I see just paraphrasing, what kind of feedback have you received so far on the use of this online communication and mapping tool? So what type of communication have you received on the story map?
Yeah, the story map, I think, like, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel. Like, I think sometimes it's like it feels so polished, right? And
Yeah.
like glossy, if you will. So like people are like, "Oh, wow, like that's so amazing." And I relate to feeling like when you're have a lot of information thrown at you and data and charts and maps, it's like kind of intense at first, right? And so some people have said like, "Wow, this looks great," or like, "I want to, dig further into this." I haven't really encountered anyone who's um not somebody I'm not working with currently on this project, like somebody who said like, oh, I took the time to read all that through and um, make sense or that they have like specific questions. So I think that story maps, I think it's generally well received, and it gives people a sense that there's like thoughtfulness and organization has gone into this. But I really want someone to like provide that critical feedback so that I know that it makes sense. Because obviously when you're like so close to it, you don't know. In terms of the map, like I think I was saying, some people are like, this is an area called Seal Harbor. This is where like Martha Stewart's house is. And so because there are buffers on these water and sewer infrastructure layers, it implies, people read it as implying that like it's not a land suitability study per se. Like they're like, you can't build that there or whatever. It's really meant to say like this is sort of what the policies indicate. It's like a first, screening, if you will. It's not like a diagnostic. So there's been some mixture of reaction there. And this community here, there's like one road that comes through that services like this village and this whole town. And people are like freaked out by the idea that this suggests additional development there. So it's really, I don't know, it's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Hopefully that made sense.
It did. Well, I know we're a little over time. I do want to thank you, Susan, for doing this presentation. I think it came together really well. I love the use of a story map, and it's good to kind of, not good, but it's good to understand the struggles that other communities face. So I really appreciate you sharing your work. I'm curious, maybe next year you could come back and give us an update on how things are going.
Yeah.
But, thank you for your time. I'm sure a lot of people on this call love seeing your face and love hearing your voice. So
Yeah.
thank you. And I know we'll probably exchange some texts later this week. So, but nice seeing
Thanks
you.
for
And
having me. Great
thank you
to
for doing this.
see all your names at a minimum. And I miss you all. Think that Parks Department is amazing. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Susan.
All right, guys. Talk to you
Bye,
soon.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Suzanne.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.